going off the NXT 2.0, how would you compare the NXT 2.0, the NXT we have now compared to NXT when it originally started, like NXT Arrival? Do you think they could do something similar with that? Come up with a pay-per-view show similar to that design, but not exactly the same name, just like a different flavor, a different idea of it?
That's the $1,000,000 question when it comes to NXT is what's going to happen at TakeOver? What is going to happen to the pay-per-view model? And WWE has been radio silent in terms of how that's going to work. Like, what are all these TV segments building toward? And I think they need that in place. They need something in place in terms of we're going to have a pay-per-view here and there because the ratings fell off a cliff last week. And, they're starting to kind of lose viewers. And if you don't have a direction as to what you're building toward, you're not going to have an audience. That's the foundation of wrestling, whether you're building to a big live show that's going to sell a bunch of tickets, a big pay-per-view that's going to sell a bunch of buys, a big television show. You need to build towards something, and I just don't see that with NXT. They're just throwing stuff at you, but they're not creating these storylines. And, until they do establish whether it's an Arrival, like you said, but or a TakeOver or whatever they end up calling it, TakeOver 2.0, they need something in place to where they're saying we're building toward this. Because then, given where the ratings are right now, I don't think it's going to help that people don't know where this is going.
Absolutely, and they need something that can draw an audience. They need they need star power. They need guys that are going to draw people to these pay-per-view crowds and want to be there for these pay-per-views live and in person. And right now,
and that's a good point. And to your point there, they needed to, I think in the draft, they make a big mistake by not having main roster guys go to NXT. This is a perfect opportunity to take maybe a Cesaro and Apollo Crews, people who they're not doing anything with on the main roster, putting them in NXT because these are names that people who watch the main roster product are going to recognize, and they could be these kind of veterans. It just can't be all these NXT veterans because that's only going to have so much of an audience. They really need main roster people on that show because 655,000 in your third week is not good at all.
No, it's not. It's not going to make the cut on the demographic or TV rating.
Yeah.
And if you go back to when they had Sasha and Bayley on there, when they were the tag team champions, they did some of their best numbers when they were competing with AEW. That should tell them they should have more guys from the main roster on NXT.
I don't know why they're not doing that now. I think they were just too prideful and they didn't want to have to take their big guns to have to compete with AEW. I think they would have rather have had NXT beat AEW. I know for a fact that WWE's dream and their plan was we're going to take this tertiary show. We're going to take this third-rate show of ours, and that's going to beat AEW because we're WWE, and that's how we roll. And that didn't happen. And I just think it was arrogance that not only the Sasha Banks show, but they had Becky Lynch on a show one week and it did better. I think AJ Styles was on a show one week and it did better. So that formula does work when you have main roster people there. And I do think they should be cycling main roster guys in and out. Even if they're not like members of the NXT roster, you need to have main roster people on this show. It's becoming patently obvious.
So I want your opinion, and it's one of the biggest talked about subjects right now. And he was one of the biggest stars in NXT history, is Kevin Owens in his contract. In your opinion, where do you think he's going to end up after his contract ends? Because Sean Ross reported it's going to be ending at the end of January. Do you think he goes to AEW and jumps ship over there? Do you think he stays? And what do you think the ripple effect would be if he does go to AEW?
I don't think there's going to be much of a ripple effect, but sure, why not? I mean, he is the AEW prototype. He's a guy who got over in Ring of Honor 10 to 15 years ago, and they're signing guys like that left and right unless you're Jay Lethal. They don't sign him, but they want to sign Adam Cole, and they've got Bryan Danielson, they've got CM Punk, and Kevin Owens was in Mount Rushmore with Adam Cole and the Young Bucks, so maybe they recreate that. But I could see Kevin Owens in AEW. I'm watching Kevin Owens these past few weeks, especially last night, and he just looks checked out. He looks like he doesn't want to be there anymore. He looks like he doesn't care. And I know that was part of the segment last night in terms of him just kind of shrugging his shoulders and being aloof. But, I mean, it just doesn't look like he's got a purpose there. And I think he realizes that it's, they're not really doing much with him. He just lost the feud to, this comedy character and Happy Corbin and this, Madcap Moss. And I just think that we'll see with Kevin Owens. I think that would be a great candidate of somebody to go down to NXT 2.0. I think that would reinvigorate him. But I don't know if he'd take offense to that or whatnot. I know he does love NXT, and he does have a great history in NXT. But we'll see, man. I think AEW would be the favorite to get Kevin Owens come 2022, especially if WWE continues to book him kind of like an afterthought.